Great, so welcome everybody. We still have colleagues joining at quite a rate, but I think we'll make a start in the interest of time with the session. So welcome everybody. Thank you for those of us who are rejoining after joining the previous session, and welcome to Cash Webinar Workstream Week for everyone who's joining us afresh for this session. Before we start, just a couple of housekeeping points. Can I kindly ask everybody to keep themselves on mute when not speaking, and in the interest of bandwidth, please also do turn off your cameras if you're not presenting. We just want to ensure that we have the best connection possible. My colleague and co-convener Dino is able to mute people, so we will use that option if we need to. Please also keep in mind that all of these sessions are being recorded, so we will send around a readout at the end of the sessions, but just to keep in mind that these sessions are being recorded for future reference. And finally, we will have time for a Q&A session at the end of the three presentations. If you have any questions, please do type them into the chat box as we go, and Dina will moderate those and report them back at the end. But we'll also have time for people to speak in person. So if you want to speak in person, either flag that in the chat box, or there is an option to raise your hand as well, and we'll give time for people who want to ask questions in person. So yeah, thank you very much for joining. We have a really interesting set of speakers lined up for today. Before we start, we have a Mentimeter, which Dina has prepared. Let me share that with you now. Apologies, sorry, I should have got this. So here is the link for the Mentimeter. If you would like to go onto this, it asks you a few questions around collaboration. So this session will look at collaboration. As those of you who are here for the introductory sessions saw, the issue of collaboration in cache programming is a significant area of interest and extremely important in ensuring that our cache programming, as we expand it, is joined up, is coherent, and avoids duplication. So this session will zoom in on that in particular, and it will do so through the lens of three collaboration mechanisms, which are the UN Common Cache System, which is a system consisting of 4 UN agencies, WFP, UNICEF, UNHCR, and UN OCHA, through the Collaborative Cache Delivery Network, a network of 15 NGOs, which together account for over $2.2 million of cache programming, and finally through the CacheCap Surge Capacity Roster. We have a number of speakers for each. So speaking on behalf of the UNCCS, we have Annika Sjöberg, who is Senior Cache Officer at UNHCR, Ninka Vopen, Program Specialist for Cache-based Assistance at UNHCR in Afghanistan. For CCD, we have Catherine Tate, who is World Vision International's Global Cache and Voucher Programming Coordinator, and Panos Navrosidis, who is the Country Director for ACF in Ethiopia and also the CCD Ethiopia Steering Leader of the CCD Ethiopia Steering Committee. And finally, for CacheCap, we have Emily Arnaud, who is the Technical Advisor for CacheCap in Colombia. So Dina is about to share her screen now for the Mentimeter. Please do take an opportunity to click on that link and feel free to answer the questions there. Dina will share a word cloud which comes up expressing what we think of when we think of collaboration in cache assistance. And we have quite a variety of different terms coming up. Cache obviously appearing very importantly, efficiency, harmonization, and effectiveness, really speaking to the crux of what we're looking to achieve, I think, with cache collaboration there. We'll do this at the end, so if you do change your views on this in the light of the presentations that we see, it'll be interesting to see the contrast and difference between the word cloud at the start and the end of the session. So without further ado, I will hand over to Annika for the first presentation. Annika, over to you.
Thank you very much, Sam. I hope everybody can hear me. I'm very pleased to present today on behalf of the 4 signatories to the UN Common Cache Statement, OCHA, WFP, UNICEF, and UNHCR. I thought we can go to the next slide, please, Dina. So we're going to go through a little bit what has happened since the launch of the statement in December 2018 in the focus countries, but also with regards to the global work streams that we have on collaborative procurement and interoperability. We thought it would be important as well to share some of the challenges and learning that we have on the collaboration in this regard, and also talk a little bit about the COVID response, and also why it matters to collaborate on cash. And then finally, what are the opportunities so that we all can engage together. So next slide, please, Dina. The focus countries, we have 7 focus countries. It's Central African Republic, Niger, Ecuador, Bangladesh, Afghanistan, Yemen, and DRC. Actually 7. And we have seen progress since the launch of the statement and since the commitment by these countries. As you know, the statement has 3 main components. One is around the common procurement. One is around interoperability of systems. And the third one is around sort of programming for cash, including, feasibility assessment, everything from assessment to monitoring, basically, including targeting. And we have seen that the implementation in the countries take different shape, and it is implemented in different ways. But we all have seen that that we have harmonized the transfer mechanism in 6 out of the 7 countries. Actually, the 7th one is online, is working on joint procurement right now. So we have 2 countries working on joint procurement between the agencies, and 5 of them are using existing arrangements in place, such as piggybacking on each other's contracts. We also have worked in some of the countries on interoperability of systems, and we're piloting some now in Bangladesh in July and August between the UNHCR system Primes and Progress, you may know better, and also the WFP scope. In all countries, we see a lot of engagement with the cash working group, which is very important, so that everybody can engage and be up to date and informed about what is going on in terms of the statement. And of course, which was already somehow ongoing in the countries, there is a lot of joint feasibility assessment. We are harmonizing our PDMs. There is a lot of development on MEBs, etc., and these kind of programming elements. We will hear more from our colleague from UNICEF in Afghanistan in terms of the focus countries. Next slide, please, Dina. So we wanted to talk a little bit about what we are doing in the global workstream on data and systems interoperability. So some of these bullet points that you see is what we have achieved since we launched the statement. We are close to final. Probably next week we have signed a data sharing agreement commitment. It very much builds on the data sharing addendum that is already in place between WFP and UNHCR, and UNICEF is joining this one. We also developed in close collaboration with a lot of different partners in September, where we held a workshop in Geneva, where we developed a minimum core data set for assistance. This is good. Davina, can you mute yourself, please? Thanks. So that's to have sort of a basis. So everybody collects the same minimum core data set for cash assistance. It's a basis for going forward in terms of data and systems interoperability. We have launched it and we have finalized it and shared it with all the countries where we're working on collaborative cash arrangements. We also have a lot of collaboration around a cash management system called Cash Assist. It is co-developed between UNICEF and UNHCR. And we're also working on interoperability with WFP systems, of course, because of the wider work in terms of increased interoperability between scope and primes. There we have developed quite a lot in terms of accessing biometrics, and we have also worked on a solution whereas we can transfer the biometrics of UNHCR system to the scope card of WFP. UNICEF is progressing on developing its own management information system as well. And above all, we have seen that in this area, it's very complex, with data protection, with working how systems work together. So we have increased our agency capacity in this regard. and have dedicated interoperability per now. Next slide, please. So now I'm going to work on talk a little bit about the second global work stream, which is about collaborative procurement. We released some months ago some guidance between UNICEF, WFP, and UNHCR on collaborative procurement. It basically sets out on how countries can go about collaborative procurement. So it talks about different options in terms of joint full-fledged procurement, or if you can piggyback on each other's contracts, or including, for example, as UNHCR has in all its contracts, and the agencies, other agencies as well, are going that way as well, so that anybody can basically use a contract and get the same benefits and fees. So we negotiate the conditions and fees, and even if you're a very small NGO and you may not get 1% of bank fee, you can get the same fee because we have included a clause in the contract that gives you that right. We also have now, if we talk about results, we actually have common transfer mechanisms now in more than 25 countries between the agencies, which is not bad if you look at where we were in December 2018. It's a big achievement. Above all, I think we have also learned a lot about the internal processes and protocols and rules, and how we have to adapt those so that collaboration becomes sort of much smoother. Next slide, please. So we present a little bit about the progress, but some of the challenges that we have addressed or are addressing or are facing is, of course, a lot around capacities. We really see that it's key to have the right people at the right place. And we may not always have, we have a cash officer who is working on cash, but now when we go into more complex sort of systems and data interoperability and these kind of things, we have learned that we need to enforce that kind of capacity in the field, but also at the global level. Incentives is very important. It's important that the countries feel that they want to collaborate because they think that is the best way to achieve outcomes for the persons we serve. And that has been, at all levels, at technical, operational, management levels. We really have to see the benefit, show what the statement implementation can bring to the people we serve. Then, of course, there are a lot of operational considerations that we all face that you are well aware of. Everything from cash feasibility, overlapping of populations. This is very common that, we may serve the refugees in one part of the country, and then maybe, UNICEF and WFP serving IDPs some other where, and we serve some IDPs very far from that region. Are we then pursuing sort of the same system, or what is the added value there, and how can we get there if we want to get there? Of course, neutrality of systems is also an important thing. There are, agency stamps on certain systems, such as scope, such as progress of UNHCR, and we want to go to sort of neutral systems that everybody can access. One of the most important thing and challenges that we have in terms of the data and interoperability workstream is data protection and integrity. It's very complex in terms of accessing each other's data, personal data. How do we deal with that? And we have a lot of reinforced data protection capacity, but we still have to work very hard on this one. Then another challenge we have seen is that we all have different controls and fee and assurances frameworks, and risk and these kind of things. And also in terms of donor coordination, of course, there are worries about different resource flow implications. Is the money now going to one agency instead of all the 4 or 8 agencies sharing the pot, etc.? So those are some of the concerns that we have heard as well. And one other opportunity, I would say, but it's also under challenges, is now, especially with COVID, the increased work on social protection with the governments. And that also depends, of course, on the government's pace. And if we want to collaborate and we want to do it through the government system, we also have to follow the pace of the government. Next slide. So in terms of the COVID response, we have seen a lot of collaboration in terms of the programmatic aspects, but also the, can we go to the next slide, Dina, please? In terms of the procurement work stream, a lot. We have really piggybacked on each other's contract in so many countries to be able to get the money to the people as quick as possible. And we have also worked a lot on the programmatic aspects, such as feasibility assessments, joint assessment. We have done some joint monitoring, etc. But here the challenges have been similar to those before. You know, emergencies, we have to respond very quickly, and we know that coordination takes time. So that has been one challenge, and of course the collaboration with the government has been another. But we have really been able to leverage existing systems in place. So why does this matter? Here we just listed a few examples of that we have seen in some of the countries. Of course, if we have data and system interoperability and people can, and we have sort of one source of data, we don't have to register and enroll people many times, and we won't see a problem with duplication of data. It is also good from a data protection point of view if we can make it work in terms of data and systems interoperability. Of course, the people will only then be assessed once, and we won't have the same post-distribution monitoring questions. We have seen that we have similar questions in our PDMs, but why do we do them 3 times instead of 1, for example? Targeting, of course, is key here, and we really need to make sure that the right people get the right assistance, and that we are equal in terms of targeting. And if we use the same data, that will simplify a lot. We're also working on a system, sort of a data hub, that can enable us to see, you know, who gets what, where, and by whom. This is a big challenge, actually. While it exists in some of the countries, it's not that easy to achieve in some of the countries where the populations that we serve are very widespread. The data is held by very many partners, for example. We're working on this one as well. Of course, this can then avoid duplication in assistance. In the past years, we have also done some work in looking into, you know, the capacity of our people of concern to access the money in terms of capacity, for example. And we all know that the digital and financial illiteracy is so widespread. So with the common transfer mechanism, I can also address the question in the chat box, meaning that we are using the same transfer mechanism for the people of concern. So they don't use, for example, 2 SIM cards to access the assistance from the 3 agencies or 4 agencies or 2 agencies. We're using the same system or same transfer mechanism to transfer the money. And this we see because we all know that, you know, we have seen beneficiaries walking around with a mobile phone in a plastic bag and they don't know how to use it. So if we double that up, a lot of different options, that could also be, you know, challenging for them. However, we have to be open to build capacity amongst the beneficiaries to address this, and also work on for them to be able to access that kind of different options that we do. Somebody is not on mute. And economies of scale is something that we have seen in many contexts as well, where we are able to negotiate because of the volumes in humanitarian assistance. We can negotiate with the banks and get lower fees, for example. We leverage agency systems, so we are creating new parallel systems. That's what we've been doing under the interoperability workstream. Next one, please. So how have we been able to work with others beyond the signatories? It really takes different shapes in different countries. Most of the time we work through the cash working groups, of course, so that everybody can be informed and sort of can engage in the statement if they wish so. We also see that other agencies such as FAO or IOM are joining sort of the statement implementation in a few countries. I think the best way to engage is probably at the country level and see what are the options, for example, of leveraging existing contracts, lower fees, using data, maybe accessing data, etc., these kind of things. The role of the cash working group here is very important. And we are actively in these cash working groups where the statement is implementation, but also beyond, of course. I only have 10 minutes and I see I have run out of time. So maybe I stop there and hand over to my colleague from UNICEF in Afghanistan to a little bit more concretely about what is ongoing at the field level. Over from me.
Thank you, Annika. Just to check if everyone can hear me properly.
Perfect, yes.
Great.
Yes.
Let me share my screen so you can all see the presentation. There we go. I hope you can see a full presentation.
Yes, it's all in order. Thanks.
Great. Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. Good morning, good evening, where you are in the world. My name is Nienke Voppen. I work with UNICEF in Afghanistan, and I'm presenting today on the Common Cash System in Afghanistan. And I think what I'll do is I'll take a bit from what Annika has been saying at the global level, how guidance documents have been developed, how we read the statement at a global level and translate that into operationalizing that at the country level. So today, on behalf of my colleagues from WFP, UNHCR, and UNOCHA, I'll be doing a quick 10-minute presentation on what we've done so far in Afghanistan and what we're planning to do in the next couple of months. So basically, as one of the pilot countries of the UNCCS, our objective in Afghanistan is to improve the complementarities among our 4 UN agencies and also other humanitarian actors in providing cash assistance in Afghanistan. We want to create synergies and ensure that vulnerable people receive humanitarian assistance in the most cost-efficient and effective manner. We do that through different ways in Afghanistan. Just to give you a practical example of how we do the day-to-day CCS implementation in Afghanistan. So basically, we have a governance structure with a senior management level that's meeting quarterly to set the strategic direction of the UNCCS in Afghanistan. That's where we get our guidance combined with our colleagues from our various HQs. In addition, we have technical level meetings. So these are colleagues from the different work streams, as Annika was saying, from programs, supply, finance, and information management. And they meet on a monthly basis. And their goal is to streamline processes, learn from each other on what processes are in place, increase complementarities, and improve efficiency of our operations. And then we have the operational level, of which I am part, and some of my other colleagues from other agencies who are also on the call today are part of that as well. And these are the main focal points from the agencies. And we meet bi-weekly, but practically much more, to facilitate the transition towards this common cash system. So we are part of all the technical meetings and also inform our senior management level to set that strategic direction. So that's the management structure, just to give you an idea of how we operationalize this common cash system in Afghanistan. So we're guided by a, let's see, it goes to the next. There's a bit of a delay. Can you see the joint action plan now?
Yes.
Great,
yes.
Thanks. Sorry, there was a bit of a delay in my PowerPoint. So we are being guided by our joint action plan that was developed in 2019. So timeline-wise, in end of 2018, the common cash system was established, and in 2019, the action plan was developed. And Afghanistan was selected as a focus country for the CCS. So I've selected a few building blocks here that are part of our action plan and some activities to highlight and to give you an idea of what we do. So for example, we're looking at joint assessment and analysis. So how can we work together to respond to crisis and emergencies in Afghanistan? One of the things we're currently doing is we're developing a TOR to start developing joint assessment templates. So can we do joint assessments to assess modalities, markets, needs, protection, risks, etc., to see how we can then inform our response, either a joint response or separate responses where we all use our comparative advantage that we have as separate agencies, but work together in a coordinated manner. On program design, similarly, as Annika was saying, we're talking about how can we align program objectives, but also work on advocacy and modality decisions that we make. And some of these activities that I'm mentioning here, we have started already, and others are part of our action plan and will be started in the near future. Another building block, for example, is identity management. For example, we're looking at the core assistance delivery data set that our colleagues from our various HQs have put together to see how we can contextualize that to the Afghanistan context. So to give you an example, one of the core criteria is the full name of the head of household. Well, something that we need to do here in Afghanistan is, can we agree on what the format for that full name should be, for example. For example, we're mapping out what data are we already collecting per agency, and how can we, if we're missing out data, make sure that we do collect it in the future to make sure that we're collecting data in the same coherent manner. Something else we're doing is comparing management information system solutions and seeing how we can learn from each other in how we manage our data, but also looking at data security and privacy. On procurement as well, we're looking at how can we piggyback on each other's LTAs, but how can we also join to get new contracts with financial service providers that we're currently not yet utilizing in Afghanistan. So I'm not going to go through all of these in detail because it will take me more than 10 minutes that I have, but this is just to give you an idea of what are the building blocks of our action plan here in Afghanistan. So what have we done so far? So as I said, the technical level meetings have all been established. So these are meeting on a monthly basis and making a lot of progress in their technical fields. So this is information management, supply and finance, and programs. To give you an example, for the procurement workstream, we have mapped all the different FSPs that we have, and then we actually found out that we have a lot of the same FSPs. So what did we then do is started sharing the LTAs to compare what rates do we get, how can we utilize that in the future to make sure that we get the same competitive rates, or even come together to make sure that we get lower rates for our contracts with FSPs. On the information management workstream, we started with informing each other on the management information system approach that we have. So WFP colleagues gave presentations on scope, UNHCR colleagues gave presentations on cash assist, UNICEF colleagues gave a presentation on the upcoming UNICEF HET MIS that is being developed. And then we started the discussion on how can we make sure that the data we collect is all in the same format. We start mapping it out for different programs that we do, so that in the future, when we have data sharing agreements in place between all the three agencies, so as Annika said, there is a data sharing agreement between UNHCR and WFP, which UNICEF is soon joining. So when that is achieved at a global level, we want to make sure that at a country level, we are all set with our data in the correct format to enable easy data sharing between our agencies. But we're also talking about data security processes and data protection assessments that we could possibly do together. We use a lot of the same partners in Afghanistan. How do we make sure that we have data security and protection policies that are translated all the way to the implementing partners in the field, international and national NGOs, and can we do assessments jointly when we are using similar partners in the field to make sure that the data that we share amongst each other and share with our partners in the field is adequately secured. On the finance work stream, for example, we've started comparing the finance processes. How do our finance colleagues work in our cash programs? And this is very important because it is a big learning curve where we're trying to see how do our policies differ and what can we change in our internal policies and processes to make sure that we are more compatible and it can help us in our future programming. But also quite practically, we're looking at new payment mechanisms. So for example, Afghan pay card, and which is a pay card that the Bank of Afghanistan might introduce, and we're thinking how can we work with the central bank or with other banks in utilizing these payment mechanisms as the UNCCS and other agencies in the country. And then, as I said, at the program work stream, we're working on this TOR for joint feasibility assessment, which is both the templates, and then after that, we're thinking of doing a pilot of utilizing these templates at one location in Afghanistan where we jointly do an assessment to see how could that inform our response. And then, of course, we have our action plan that is guiding, and that will be reviewed by the end of this month with our colleagues. Now, to give you an idea of where we're going next, the TOR for the feasibility assessment is almost completed its internal review, and then we're requesting input from our cash and voucher working group partners in Afghanistan, because these are all very important partners in humanitarian cash response, both as implementing partners of some of our UN agencies, but also as primary responders. So their input is very important to make sure that we're developing something that is useful for the entire community and not just for the CCS agencies. So once we've done that, we will carry out one assessment in one selected site, again working closely with the cash and voucher working group. And then we have a review of our action plan coming up later this month, early next month, and we'll have a special session with the cash and voucher working group to look at how they can contribute more to activities in our action plan, and also look at different opportunities for cooperation. And then another thing on our agenda is that we want to initiate discussions on donor interest and funding, not necessarily for joint programming, but looking at how can we, for example, facilitate the joint feasibility assessments, and can we get donor interest or funding for activities like that? And that's also something that we're starting in the next couple of months. And then one thing I wanted to highlight is the engagement with the cash and voucher working group, because as the UNCCS is an operational collaboration agreement, the cash working group is, of course, a coordination mechanism. But as the UNCCS in Afghanistan, we try to actively participate in the cash and voucher working group, of course, and also contribute to the existing coordination mechanism that the cash and voucher working group in Afghanistan is. So we're trying to be open and transparent with the members and the co-leads of the cash and voucher working group, and share information on the progress of the CCS in every single meeting. So there's a standing agenda item for the CCS to provide a quick update. As I said, we're increasingly getting more input from the cash and voucher working group on, for example, the action plan in the mid-annual review, but also in finalizing outputs like the TOR for joint feasibility assessment. And then to give you one practical example of how we're working with the cash and voucher working group, is that we're taking as the CCS on an advocacy role, for example, with the government on how to ease regulatory restrictions on the use of mobile money in Afghanistan. This is especially relevant in the COVID response that many humanitarian agencies are currently involved in. So this is something that the cash and voucher working group can't do because they're not an operational body. So the CCS is taking on this role with UNHCR at the country level in the lead to carry out this advocacy role. I think I'll leave it there. Very happy to take questions at the end after we've done all the presentations, and then I'll hand over back to Sam now. Thank you so much, everyone.
Excellent. Thank you very much both for those really interesting presentations. Certainly a lot of detail, and it's great to see the progress that's been made so far. We do indeed have quite a few questions coming through in the chat bar, but I think we'll leave those until the end and ask them as a sort of group of questions towards the end. I'll hand over straight away now to Catherine from the CCD to start their presentation. Catherine, over to you.
Thank you very much. Everyone can hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you very well, thank you.
Wonderful, thank you so much. Just a second, please. I think I'm sharing now. All right. The CCD, as you know, is a global level network at operating various assistance. So CCD member organizations currently are estimated to deliver approximately 80% of last month. The slide, if you see that, Max. Yeah. So as you can imagine, we're actually very much looking at a kind of an update on where we are at. And one of the key areas of our work really looks at the flexibility and agility, in particular relating to our individual member organizations' strengths, footprint, scale up, using existing systems, as you've just heard also from the UNCCS, and network capacities. So we're aiming at creating a cash ecosystem for and with local community, for example, around financial inclusion linkages, as well as social protection referrals when it comes to cash assistance, working with national governments and other actors. So we really aim at improving the efficiency and effectiveness to better serve affected populations through adaptive cash value chain support fit for purpose and context appropriate complementarity, which in the end actually serves better value for money, reaching actually those that are hardest to reach in the very difficult remote areas, as well as those that are most vulnerable and often are excluded even by national government social protection, social assistance mechanisms. Finally, one of the key areas that the CCD has seen a lot of progress in is harnessing and amplifying the power of our combined NGO voices on advocacy issues. That in particular holds true for social protection, but is not limited to that. We actually clearly have a area of strong push, which is the community base and the best assets of local actors, which we want to actually amplify further in the near future. One of the areas that we see, and as you have also heard from the right now, the Grand Bargain introductory webinar, is that there is a big push and a big ask for more localization. And we definitely see that need as well. Actually speaking to many of our country networks or local collaborations that may not yet be so formalized, to involve and have at equal par many more local actors. The CCD in Colombia, for example, has highlighted that CCD is really an operational mechanism, and surely coordination is part of that, but achieve improved collaboration. Colombia members actually said that the platform actually helps to unify technical expertise and capacity that is operational in the field and actually effective to also influence policies that are based on evidence. And we do see that this is very important when it comes to, in particular right now, the different issues around COVID, which we see actually challenges all of our humanitarian architecture, as we know, and the way we do humanitarian. Colleagues and our colleague has also deployed a lot of collaboration facilitators, managers in the different contexts. You can see here the numbers. I don't need to read them to you. One of the key areas that we've really seen as a strength is bringing together different country offices, different country initiatives, not only in the current more mature functioning CCD platforms, which is Colombia, Ecuador, Ethiopia, Nigeria, and Uganda, but also in more than 14 other country contexts where our partners, our members and extended members actually are interested in joining a CCD setup. So what we really look at is to create this cash ecosystem, working with other partners, including UNCCS and obviously the cash working groups and other partners, in particular even FSPs, to strengthen these elements of financial inclusion and social protection and financial assistance to really have longer lasting and meaningful impact. One of the key areas we've seen, which also was highlighted in today's introductory session, was the issue around accountability, which is an element of quality implementation. And that goes beyond just the transfer as such and the humanitarian accountability mechanism, but when we're looking at social protection mechanisms and policies and assistance provided, really the duty bearer changes, and therefore we need new means and engagement that is actually more typical for development actors to hold governments accountable to what they have committed and strengthen their systems and work together with them. So in short, one of the key learnings we have had over the last 1.5 to 2 years really looks at the collaboration toolkit and the impact model that we have developed, which has been very, very much utilized by many of our partners, adapted, improved, and some components haven't worked, and that's what we actually have learned very well, how to not actually enforce, but actually have country level members decide what is the best. So no single blueprint is there. It is about having clear roles and responsibilities for each of the CCD members based on their changing needs or their changing context and the different phases in the cash value chain, and adapting that, which requires a lot of particular skill sets. Also, as I said, working much more with local actors. We're not yet there, but we really enhance this. And we acknowledge also, while there's collaboration, there may also be competition. And the issue around this is we need to be building trust among each other so that there can be this open opportunity of engaging with each other and enhancing speed by delivering cash. We've seen that, for example, in Ethiopia, where we really had a significant reduction of implementation, where pre-CCD times, it took 6 months for NGOs to come together and agree. And then when CCD was established, it just took 2 weeks to agree, sign an MOU, sign the data sharing agreement in the subsequent weeks and months, and implement actually cash voucher distributions of about $23 million of value to nearly 500,000 households within the first 3 months of the ECO-funded cash consortium there under CCD flag. We do see that reinforcing the existing cash architecture is super important. As we said, Cash Working Group is the key coordination mechanism, and CCD members, as you will hear from Ecuador and also the Colombia example, have helped to strengthen the expertise to take some components and drive them forward on behalf of the whole cash community in a country context. I've alluded to the operational data sharing agreements that we have for 2 countries already being implemented, shared SOPs and other aspects. That really creates transparency, it creates efficiencies, there is no doubt about that. But again, it all does not help to just look at cost efficiency if we do not help to strengthen the quality and the actual impact, and that requires a systematic change as well. Therefore, our Social Protection Working Group is very strongly looking at not only implementing more of a COVID response strategy on behalf of and with the CCD members, but also providing examples of from theory to practice how we've linked humanitarian cash voucher assistance to social protection, a paper that will come out later this week. With this, I will just stop and hand over to my colleague from the CCD Ethiopia, Panos. Please go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Good morning and good afternoon from the Ethiopia CCD. I don't know if Dina can share her screen. I sent the presentation because my connection is a bit slow. Thank you, Dina. So essentially, I'll walk you through the CCD Ethiopia for the next 10 minutes. I'm the country director of Action Against Hunger and one of the 6 steering committee members. The CCD in Ethiopia started about 18 months ago. I would say it was at the end of 2018, and as Catherine said, very fast we moved ahead, and we managed to form a consortium and sign an MOU among 14 different agencies. So, as you know, in total we have 15 agencies in the global CCD, and we have a quite scary number of implementing partners in Ethiopia, in the sense that collaboration can be seen as an obstacle. But what we actually saw very quickly, and we can move to the next slide, is that because of the very strong sense of partnership and the culture in Ethiopia among the country directors to collaborate and compete all at the same time, very quickly we formed this consortium, and we moved ahead presenting our case to the donors. We can move to the next slide, please. Thank you. So the question is, how do we operationalize, how do we materialize the global vision of the CCD, and how we bring it down to the local level? So when it comes to Ethiopia, the CCD takes 2 different forms. One is the typical consortia that we are all familiar with. So this is a project-based partnership. And then we have the operational partnerships. And please bear with me, and within the next 5 minutes, I will explain what I mean by that. But this is the first key pillar of the CCD in Ethiopia. The second one is very strong governance. So as I said, there is a culture of collaboration and partnerships in Ethiopia. Country directors, they know very well each other, and they were ready to come together. We have 6 steering committee members with very strong leadership, providing guidance to the members of the CCD. And the last point I want to highlight is the appetite to share resources. So whatever we produce within the CCD Ethiopia is essentially shared with the members, but also outside the members through the CASH working group. So it was commonly agreed and decided that whatever we produce is not going to stay with us, but actually is going to benefit the entire CASH ecosystem in Ethiopia and whoever is active within that. I think we can move to the next slide. Thank you. Just to give you a visual material that will explain to you how the CCD in Ethiopia works, what you see in this slide is a typical consortium with a leading agency, and below we have 2 operational partners, Action Against Hunger and IRC. What is very interesting about this consortium is that Action Against Hunger managed to implement at a rate of 84 euro cents to the euro, while IRC had an outstanding 92 euro cents to the euro. And the reason for that is because the entire CCD built on existing infrastructure, and there was a cost-sharing understanding among the country directors, making sure that we have a very cost-effective partnership. Now, the other interesting element is the fact that we all agreed that we're going to use the World Vision LMMS beneficiary registration and data management system. And the other element is that Save the Children took the lead as a third-party monitoring partner. So essentially, Save the Children will come to the Action Against Hunger and the IRC operational areas and conduct a third-party monitoring at the beginning, throughout, and at the end of the operation. While on the right side of the visual, you will see that the CRS is the collaboration manager. They are holding the so-called CCD unit. And as we can see in the next slide, please. Thank you. This is something that continued also in the second subset consortium within the same grant funded by ECHO. So what you see in this slide is that some of the partners actually within the same grant, they changed, and that was decided based on a fit for purpose principle. So whoever is stronger geographically and technically then takes the lead in a given location. What remained common was the beneficiary and data registration and management system, which is the LMMS. And in this case, IRC became the meal third party because they were stronger in this area. They were able to cover a number of Weredas, as it is one of the administration layers in Ethiopia. More interestingly, you will see on the right side of the slide that we have 2 additional projects, one funded by GAC, the Canadians, and the other one by OFDA USAID. And while these projects are not really linked to the CCD as such, there was operational collaboration, making sure that within the same area of operation, which was Somali region in this case, everybody is using the same systems and everything is fully harmonized. So what the CCD achieved was to increase the confidence among donors for the individual agencies' capacity to deliver cash at scale. And of course, in some cases that takes the form of the CCD, and in some other cases it takes the form of individual agencies having their own program. If we move to the next slide, please. Thank you. So it's all about strengthening the national level systems, and in that aspect we have some new exciting things that are coming up. The first one is the joint market monitoring initiative in collaboration with REACH. This is taking off as we speak, so there isn't much to share right now, but we should be able to have some lessons learned in the next 2 to 3 months. The second point is a partnership within the CCD. So some of the members of the CCD, they have put forward an idea of doing a comparative study between 3 to 4 different financial service providers for mobile money in Ethiopia. But what is interesting about that, while the topic is quite common, what is interesting is that the CCD members, they agreed to put seed funding from their own resources, so from unrestricted own resources from the headquarters, and deliver this initial pilot and hopefully generate enough donor interest to later on put additional money and fund phase 2 and grow at scale with mobile service providers in Ethiopia. So again, that showcases the commitment on behalf of the CCD members and the fact that they are ready to invest their own money and build further on a common system. The last point is the very obvious, of course. We collaborate with the cash working group, and one question that may come is whether there is an overlap or a duplication. I would say not really. So what we have seen over the years in other countries before the CCD and during the CCD time is that this kind of INGO partnerships, they work as catalysts for the CCD. So essentially they're pushing all the partners to collaborate through the cash working group and deliver commonly agreed products in a timely manner, and they create traction in a way. So I think the CCD has been very useful for the cash working group in Ethiopia in the sense that they pushed forward the agenda and they accelerated a couple of things that they had stagnated for months in the context of Ethiopia. Next point, please. So that's my last slide. I'll start again by highlighting the last point. So we were able to have a number of webinars and workshops with the cash working group, and we make sure that whatever material we create in the CCD are shared with the cash working group members for the common good. So for me, it's one of the foundations of the CCD. The next one is knowledge sharing. This is quite obvious to say, but to be frank with you, the feedback we provide is that unless we have a knowledge sharing and data manager, it's very hard to produce this solid evidence, and we call on all the donors and whoever is interested in the CCD to actually invest on this kind of positions and make sure that we generate this evidence and we capture it going beyond the very operational lessons learned that we often have. The third element is the efficiency. I think I already talked about some numbers. What is important to know about Ethiopia is that we work with the private sector, we work with the private sector, and we had 0 fees. So we managed to get into an agreement with Awash Bank, most of the partners, and we had for 0 fees full service across Ethiopia. So clearly, the CCD in Ethiopia can cover the entire country, can go at scale, can work with big projects. And one of the lessons learned within less than 1 year, I would say, is that we managed to push the private banks in Ethiopia to work with us and improve their digitization systems, or the digital systems and the digitization process, and make it easier for us to work with them. The third point is on the the fourth point, apologies for the oversight, is on the collaboration unit. So it's pretty clear that a collaboration manager is very much needed. In this case, Josie, who is the collaboration manager, it's her birthday today, so she couldn't be with us. But what we know is that without her, it wouldn't be easy to navigate the politics. And again, despite the whole sense of coming together and overcoming all the challenges, it's good to have this neutral voice in the room. The last element is about the relationship and trust. So while some CCD partners are in, some others are out, but we have seen that it has been working relatively well. And this is because, again, we have a fit-for-purpose principle. There's a scoring matrix, and based on that, we decide which agencies are going to take the lead in certain locations. That's the end of my presentation, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have. Back to Sam or Dina. Thank you.
Thank you, Panos, and Catherine as well. That was excellent. Again, a lot of great progress on display, and really good to see the progress that the CCD is making. As with previously, I think we'll take questions at the end. I do see there's more questions in the chat part, but for now, I will hand over to Emily, who will talk through some of the work that she's doing with CashCap in support of the CCD. Over to you, Emily. Emily, I think you might still be on mute if you're trying to speak at the minute. We can see your screen, but we can't hear you.
Sorry, I'm trying to. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, perfect. Sorry about that. So can you see my full screen?
Yes, we can, yeah.
Okay, great. So good morning, everyone from Colombia, afternoon or evening for some of you. My name is Emily, and I'm currently deployed through CashCap as CCD Technical Advisor for Colombia. So thank you very much for inviting me today, and it's a pleasure to be with you. So today I'm going to zoom in to one of the findings that was just mentioned by our CCD colleagues in Ethiopia, and look at how to create an inclusive and strong cash ecosystem through technical collaboration, especially in our case through the Cash Working Group. So the structure that I will follow will be to first present CashCap support to the CCD and the collaboration model before focusing on 3 examples of how the CCD collaboration efforts provided support to the technical aspect here. So those 3 things are harmonizing meal tools and approaches, developing an eligibility criteria for MPTA programming, and creating a space for accountability and communication with communities. And then at the end, I will conclude on some lessons learned, just like my colleagues did, and recommendations for discussions. So to begin with, given the audience, I'm pretty sure a lot of you know what CashCap is, but just a reminder that CashCap is a roster which offers the humanitarian and development community independent experts upon requests to support cash and markets-based assistance in crises. CashCap basically aims to deploy the right expertise to the right places at the right time. And these deployees provide support on technical issues, such as is my case as a technical advisor, but also coordination and capacity development across all response phases, and tries to build bridges between the humanitarian and development actors. So I think what's interesting here is that CashCap are usually deployed either through cash working groups, global clusters, or collaboration initiatives. And this work links obviously with discussions such as this one about the Grand Bargain or global frameworks for cash, with field practitioners across sectors contributing to a more holistic response at country or regional levels. So here, I won't repeat it, you have some numbers, but in 2020, there was about 50 experts on the roster, and around 20 are currently under contract. Now, to get into the subject matter, more about CashCap's contribution to the CCD in the Americas. So 4 CashCap experts were deployed between December 2018 and 2020 to Colombia and Ecuador in response to the Venezuela migration crisis. So here, it was a new model for CashCap in the sense that the 4 experts were hosted by NGOs, namely the Catholic Relief Services, the Danish Refugee Council, and Save the Children. So in both countries, in Ecuador and Colombia, there were newly set up CCDs in very different operational contexts in terms of government response and volume of CVA actors. And as a result, CashCap really identified the need to have specialist profiles with strong coordination, but also technical expertise, even if less direct country experience. So while in CCD Colombia, the CashCap supported on harmonizing the delivery of CVA, such as setting up processes, systems, and tools. In Ecuador, our colleagues focused on harmonizing CVA coordination and technical capacity of all CVA actors. And as I will see today, in both cases, deployees focused on creating close links with the cash working groups to strengthen collaboration without duplicating coordination spaces. And just to note that I will obviously focus more on Colombia, as it is the context that I know better. But I have my colleagues from Ecuador as well who can come in case there's Ecuador-specific questions about CashCap's work there. So now a little bit, just like our colleagues did on the collaboration model in Colombia, and note that we just had our strategic workshop. So this is very much depending on that. So it's very much just like the case in Ethiopia, sorry, a collaboration model that adapts to the context. In 2019, most of the activities focused on supporting the setup and rollout of internal and external operational structures for an upcoming OFDA-funded multi-purpose cash program, which is now in full force. And one key aspect of this collaboration was promoting beneficiary data management in order to mitigate duplication and assistance, including data protection consideration. So to do this, we had 8 members operating across 9 regions. And the idea is really to maximize the strength of each actor. And yes, just going back to our collaboration model and how we see ourselves from our strategic workshop, we really identify as a platform where technical expertise, operational capacity, and evidence-based advocacy are brought together to promote learning and change. And before all, just like Catherine mentioned, it's an operational alliance, which commits to delivering people-centric, multi-purpose cash at scale in a coordinated, adaptable, and harmonized way. And see, here you have the membership. So there's ACTED, Action Against Hunger, NRC, DRC, Mercy Corps, IRC, Save the Children, and World Vision. And those 7 of these members are split into 2 consortiums. And moving on, I just wanted to show you a little bit how we, in practice, provide technical support through existing coordination structures. So since May, the CCD has been leading one of the sub-working group of the cash working group. And this really provides interesting learning on how we can add value technically without duplicating spaces. So you can see, I hope on my screen, that we have 2 working groups. One which is on meal tools with a target on eligibility and targeting, and another one on needs analysis and market assessments. So we're very much leaning on that first one, which has 3 components to it. One on targeting and eligibility, another one on support on monitoring and evaluation tools, standards and processes, and a third one on accountability and developing key messages. So now I'm going to look at each one because I think each one is very interesting for us on the technical level. So the first one, as I mentioned, was about meal tools and processes. So in 2019, the sub-working group was set up. And the first thing we did was consolidate and analyze existing monitoring and evaluation tools, standards and processes. Again, very much linked to this big MPCA project that was about to start, that was OFDA funded. So some of the things we did through this group, I probably won't list them all because there's quite a bit, but we provided guidance on outcome indicators. We tried to harmonize baseline and endline surveys, and we compiled programmatic information through 4 Ws to create joint analysis for the cash working group and maps. So I put the links there. If you're interested, you can very much see that. Another thing we did with the cash working group coordinator is that we did short missions, joint missions, to increase the capacity of our field colleagues and report back on key programmatic challenges through joint trainings and field visits. So we had a plan to do a lot more, but obviously COVID came and it sort of made us reassess what we could do. And then, yes, about COVID. So one of the first things we did at the start of COVID was that we worked together between the CCD and the Cash Working Group on a matrix of risks and mitigation measures. So again, I invite you to see it if you want to have more information about it. And this was a very good, I think, a very interesting exercise because it was used by a lot of the actors to adapt their programming. And it was also used as a template in other countries that have had similar needs. Now about the other technical area, which is joint eligibility and targeting strategy. So as part of this sub-working group, we created sort of a sub-working group to work jointly on developing a vulnerability criteria for MPCA programming and cash programming in general, cash and voucher programming. So within this sub-working group, we had the presence of the UNHCR, WFP, and we had special contributions from sectorial focal points, especially on protection and nutrition. So this really helped us develop this tool. I'm not going to go into exactly how it works because this is a whole webinar in itself. But just to say that we had because we were quite a lot of actors, we could do a statistical simulation model to determine the most vulnerable families and jointly decide what we think the cutoff point should be. It's a bit of a scorecard. So to see together how to do this in the way that most people understand vulnerability. And we did a pilot as well to try and see how it works in practice and to adapt. And this is really benefiting from the strength of being many actors, to have real-time data and to be able to adapt quickly. Again, linking this to COVID, when COVID first came in March, at least when it came to Colombia, we understood that we had to quickly adapt because suddenly we had to do everything at a distance, remotely. And this had huge challenges for us and the methodology that we had chosen at the beginning. So jointly we got together, we reassessed and we looked at global models and we did a new questionnaire, which is now being used by all the CCD actors. And a version of this is also being used by WFP. And I think this was very interesting and it showed the strength of being able to get together quickly. And then to flag that we're, at least the consortiums are going to do a wider research based on proxy means testing in order to continue to strengthen this tool and strengthen the targeting strategy in Colombia. And then finally, the final point I wanted to focus on was how we promoted two-way communication and accountability to the communities we served. So through this sub-working group, we developed key messages and facilitated the development of accountability mechanisms. So these key messages, in our case, this was a work led by Save the Children. They made a document basically that was shared around to all the members of the Cash Working Group, and that helps field teams and communication with various actors, whether it is helplines or communication with local governments, but it's really made to be able to serve that purpose. And then the group also served as a platform to encourage initiatives that focus on communication with communities, to link such initiatives with organizations that are keen to engage in new types of projects and methods. So this isn't something we do per se, but we help them reach people. For example, 40 local responders were trained in participatory communication with community. And this was an activity that was facilitated by CashCap and NORCAP in support of the Cash Working Group and with the support of Action Against Hunger, Humanitarian Inclusion, Save the Children, and the Colombian Red Cross. So what I hope you can see on the screen here is program participants through these initiatives that are providing direct feedback in a participatory video to Cash Working Group members during a Cash Working Group meeting. So I think this is very interesting. It's something I personally hadn't seen in a working group. And it's a very interesting way to keep us accountable and focused on the communities that we serve. So I really encourage you, I put the link there, if you're interested in this, to read about the report and watch the videos that were produced. And now, just like my colleague, I wanted to focus on some of our learnings, both in terms of our successes, but obviously also in terms of our challenges. So obviously, I think a key part of our model, both in Ecuador and Colombia, was to try and ensure a fluid articulation and a complementarity of efforts with the cash working group. And this is very different in different countries. So for example, in Ecuador, this meant having a dedicated CVA expert for technical capacity building and coordination with the CCD members, forging a collaborative relationship with what was a UN-mandated coordination platform. Obviously, in their case, 7 of the 8 cash working group members were also CCD members. So this was very important to do together, to have a capacity mapping and work plan in line with the cash working group work plan, and clarify roles and responsibilities. So in their case, they were co-leading the cash working group. In our case, in Colombia, we are leading a technical working group. But in the end, it's the same focus on trying to be complementary and add technical value. Then, obviously, the focus on standardization of products and tools. So this includes focusing on standardization beneficiary selection criteria, like I mentioned, M&E indicators to measure progress, but also data management systems to create efficiencies of scale, saving costs and time. And these efforts continue as part of the broader strategy of the cash working group and the CCD. Now, learning from the challenges, well, obviously, one of the challenge is funding constraints. So in some cases, funding isn't really there for coordination or collaboration per se, and it's not easy to find it within the NGOs. And this is something that can limit CCD members to secure external funding for greater response and collaboration implementation opportunities. And then just to echo what my other colleagues had said, I think we learned a lot about how to work as a team. And I very much agree with the slide before about the collaboration units. We find it very important to mix different types of profiles when doing these sort of initiatives. I mean, a lot of it has to do with data, for example. So you need really good data managers. You need soft skills. So collaboration managers are also really key. But sometimes you need technical capacity. You need communication efforts. And when we have all this already in country through the consortium sometimes or through our colleagues. But when we have a unit, it really helps us be strong. So I think that this is a major learning for us, and it's something that after our strategy, we're trying to apply to how we're going to move forward in the future. So that's all from my side. Thank you very much for your time, and I'm happy to answer questions afterwards. Over to you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Emily. Again, a really interesting presentation with a great deal of material. I'm going to share now in the chat box a link to the second Mentimeter, where we can again share our thoughts and views on what collaboration means to us in the light of the excellent presentations and the sort of real world examples that we've seen just there. If anyone's views have changed on collaboration and what it means in practice, feel free to put that in. Dina will share the Mentimeter word cloud now with everybody's views. We have a bit of time left for questions now. So I believe Dina has been moderating some of the ones from the chat bar, and we'll pull out a few examples. So I'll hand over to Dina for that. At the same time, please do continue to add questions to the chat bar as we go. Or if anybody wants to ask a question in person, then please do raise your hand using the hand raise function. But for now, I'll hand over to Dina to pull out a few questions from the chat bar. So over to you, Dina.
Great. So I'm selecting a couple and conscious of time here as well. But if I can go back to UNCCS, Kira from Goal had asked, how do you envisage in Afghanistan opening up collaborative initiatives to NGOs, such as the common FSP agreements? And then I believe that was somewhat in line with what Vincent had asked about if you can elaborate on how CCS and the Cash and Voucher Working Group are in sync in Afghanistan, and also how do you see the CCS role with other players such as the World Bank? Over.
Maybe I start then, Dina, and then I hand over to Afghanistan for answering the Afghanistan-related questions. So on the the procurement questions, there was one on the 25 countries as well. There are different arrangements. It's really about the transfer mechanism that is the same one for the beneficiaries, so that they use the same instrument. There we have different arrangements in different countries. So in 2 of the priority countries, in Ecuador and Niger, we're undergoing joint procurement. But in many other countries, we're doing piggybacking, and in some other countries, we are also using each other's collaborative clauses in our countries, so that every agency or organization signs their own agreement with the bank, but have the same conditions and fees. So it really varies, and this is also in line with our global guidance. We also have a FSP register between the agencies now, so we can see, for example, when WFP's contracts will expire, when they renewal their contracts in the different countries. So that also relates to the countries in terms of the fees and piggybacking. So we can see, okay, UNICEF is now procuring and WFP's contract is expiring X, Y, and Z, and ours is then. So that's why we can also maximize the efficiencies in terms of the transfer fees and bank fees, etc. And in terms of openness, of course, all of this is open to any organization who wish to join. And we are working through the cash working groups and are inviting others to piggyback. I mean, there are many examples from, Jordan, Lebanon, and other places where we have, 30 agencies benefiting from such arrangements. On the cash working group, of course, in terms of Sophie's question, I agree. It's great that we can do joint assessments through the cash working groups. But for example, in Niger, which is a pilot country, WFP and UNHCR may be the only ones helping populations by the border, for example. And it doesn't make sense to then engage UNICEF to come along and do an assessment, if you see what I mean, or World Vision if they're not there. So it's really about the spread of the populations and which partners are relevant for which assessments. So of course, all of these feasibility assessments are shared in the cash working group, so everybody can benefit from the learnings. But who engages where, that really depends on the purpose and what the added value is for that agency, of course. On the gender, perhaps maybe I just quickly go through that one. I think it's a very relevant question, a very important one. Of course, we are doing all gender analysis that we should, from the protection risk assessment, from gender assessment, for gender analysis, and it really, in terms of using the use of transfer mechanisms, we really get the different answers from women still. Even in the same country, the Nigerian women, for example, say, I want to have the phone and I want to have the money, while then the Malian women say, no, we don't want to because there's a risk of violence, etc. We don't want, it's better if you give it to the man. So it's all context specific, and it has to be sort of dictated based on gender perspective through the whole program cycle. In terms of the data and systems interoperability, this aggregated data is one of our key purposes in the systems and interoperability working group. Over to you, Afghanistan.
Thank you, Annika. I think you've covered a lot already. Just to come back on the question of whether we're opening up some of these mechanisms to other partners like NGOs in Afghanistan, for example, contracts with FSPs. This is definitely something that we're trying to do, because we know that as a CCS we can be quite a strong bloc to negotiate with financial service providers, for example, and we want the wider humanitarian community to benefit from that, definitely. As we might have a bigger caseload as UN agencies, we could bring that price down. If we can agree with FSPs to include other humanitarian agencies as per our global guidance on this, then absolutely that's something that we want to work on, and that's something that we're now in a supply working group as one of the work streams of the CCS, are working on to see how can we make it more inclusive. For example, a lot of our contracts already have these clauses in there that says other UN agencies can piggyback on these contracts for the same fees, and let's see how we can extend that to say any other humanitarian agency can piggyback on these contracts. And we've seen examples of that in other countries, and we can do the same in Afghanistan. So that's definitely something that we are working on. I think on the Cash and Voucher Working Group question that came up a few times, I think it's important to say that also the CCS is new in these contexts, as a new operational way of working together for us. And we're also shaping this role with the Cash and Voucher Working Group as we go. And I think an important step is that we're having a joint meeting with the Cash and Voucher Working Group partners coming up next month to see how can we make sure that we don't duplicate efforts. How can we go back to the drawing board and look at our action plan and see, okay, these activities that are there, can we do them jointly? Do they make sense more, as Annika said, only for certain agencies to do these assessments, or are there areas where we can work together better as with Cash Voucher Working Group as the coordination mechanism in the country? And then lastly, the question on, for example, the interaction with the World Bank. That's definitely something that as the CCS we're trying to engage with the World Bank on as they're scaling up their cash support in Afghanistan, and we're currently doing that mostly through WFP in discussions with the World Bank. We're also seeking advice and seeing how can we better collaborate. So those discussions are definitely ongoing, and I can foresee that in the next coming months these discussions will be intensified as well. So I hope that it answers the questions and leaves some time for other colleagues to address some questions.
Great, thank you. You all actually tackled most of the questions that were on there, so thanks. I know, Ruko, you had asked a question that Panos has answered in the chat, but maybe just so that everyone else can also hear that, considering it's one of the last questions. Ruko was asking if the funding constraints were related to actual funding limitations, or if it was related to the fact that CCD members aren't adequately budgeting for the needed resources. So maybe, I don't know, Panos, if you'd like to answer that, or maybe Catherine, over.
Sure, Dina, I can take this question. I think it was already answered, but just to emphasize again, what we see right now is that with the limited funding we have from ECHO, and we are very appreciative to ECHO. However, what we see is that we are struggling to continue having the CCD collaboration unit up and running beyond the project. So there is a lot of know-how, a lot of expertise, and a lot of material already developed by the CCD collaboration unit. The question is, if we lose these few staff that we have in Ethiopia, can we quickly bounce back and get the team together? So again, continuity and a bit more long-term funding would be very much welcome. Thank you.
Great, Catherine, I don't know if you have anything else to add to that, or if I can move on to the next question.
Thank you. Just just to highlight that I do think we see the sustainability of funding is obviously one piece, but as we want to create much more locally enabled and sustainable mechanisms, and in particular strengthening civil society, national actors like national governments in doing so, working together, we do think that there's still, some inequality in terms of funding priorities. So maybe, Ruko, that responds to your question. Thanks.
Thank you. And I'd just like to highlight that both Panos and Catherine have responded to several questions related to the CCD in the chat. So I think in the essence of time, not to go through those, but I hope everyone had their questions answered. Also, just to note that both the UNCCS and the CCD have put in a couple links. So the UNCCS has a draft Q&A that is available, and there's a link in the chat. And Catherine has put in the website for the CCD so that you can get a little bit more information on the CCD over there. And one last question that I had seen from Chloe, if I'm not mistaken, was sorry, I'm trying to find it, was looking at specifically a general question for CashCap, the CashCap model, and if there was any perspective on the deployment of national local expertise rather than international deployment. So Emily and maybe Marga, over to you.
I don't know if Marga wants to take this, but from what I know, one interesting development now is especially with COVID, NORCAP and CashCap experts are deploying to their own countries, which is something new. And obviously, a part of what we do here is to build the support of local partners. So this is how we sort of work on the local dimension to it. But I don't know if my colleagues from CashCap want to talk more about that.
Marga, can you, I think maybe you're still on mute if you wanted to respond to that.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Apologies, my computer was frozen. So basically, CashCap deployments aim to address capacity gaps. Normally, as Emily did show in the presentation, at the country level or at the global level, etc. So the idea of the deployments is to ensure that part of the exit strategy of a CashCap deployment in a country or in a region is to build the capacity of the local actors so that the gap doesn't exist. And now, as Emily mentioned, with COVID and the movement restrictions, there are a number of NORCAPs. CashCap is under the NORCAP roster, is a Cash Experts roster. There is a change in policy, and there were a number of national cash experts, CashCap or any other rosters that were deployed to their own countries. So I'm not so sure if there is a change in policy but there is definitely a commitment to localization and to build local capacity, national actors, including governments, etc. And yeah, I think it may be, I cannot really answer officially if there is a new policy, but definitely we are supporting localization. Over.
Great, thank you. And there are a couple more questions in the chat, so I might just go ahead and use the last couple minutes to address those as well. Liz has asked that if the presenters could address how the impact of coordinated large-scale programming on user experiences of cash recipients is being explored and addressed, particularly recipients on the receiving end of the increasing automated processes in large-scale cash programming. So she referenced the few reports that have been released recently, the Lebanon report through Chameleon Research on AAP, and then I wonder if I can pass that over to folks from either CCD, CCS. Over. Have we lost folks? I think, oh, there we are, okay.
I'm here. I can quickly respond to that, and it's a very simple answer that to Liz's question, that it's not something that we're currently doing yet in Afghanistan as part of the CCS, but I think it's definitely something that we should consider and include in our action plan to continue to focus on recipient experience as well, and do joint assessments on that in collaboration with the Cash Working Group and other partners to make sure that we have a good understanding of recipient experiences in that. So that's all I can say. Maybe CCD colleagues have more experience on that in other countries.
I'll let folks from CCD respond. Catherine Panos.
Let me just briefly say, yes, absolutely. So as you know, individual member organizations have implemented humanitarian accountability with feedback mechanisms in the past, and we're actually escalating and amplifying that, as I said before, through social accountability mechanisms to look at more holistic approaches to government policies, the implementation. Obviously, all CCD members have other interventions besides cash and many are humanitarian and development actors. So that brings a more holistic, stronger, I think, and amplified voice. But I do think we all jointly as a CASH community can do much better in putting the user at the center and also hearing and listening, implementing actually the feedback. So maybe Marga or Emily want to speak to that as well, as CashCap has done some fantastic work around that. Thanks.
Just to mention, in addition to what Catherine was saying, this was one of the issues that we worked with in the Cash Working Group, and it's a major challenge during COVID times. So some of our projects had to go completely remote, and unfortunately, one of the main findings through communication with community work is the importance of two-way communication and having direct communication with beneficiaries. And when you can only rely on phones, this is incredibly difficult. So I think that there is a lot more needed in terms of guidance on how to do it efficiently during these difficult times. Over.
Great, thank you. I've noticed that we're 2 minutes over, and there's still a couple questions in the chat. So what we'll do is we'll ensure that those go out to the relevant counterparts and make sure that we're able to answer those as well. And with that, maybe over to you, Sam.
Thank you, Dina. Thank you to everyone who asked questions and responded to questions. It was an extremely interesting session. As Dina says, we'll ensure that the questions that are still remaining get sent out to people and that we will get responses. So with that, I think, yeah, as Dina said, we're a couple of minutes over. I think it was an extremely interesting session. Thanks to everyone who participated and thanks to everyone who dialed in as well. Definitely a huge amount of material there. Very interesting to see the Mentimeter here at the end, some quite different responses around complementarity and deficiency in particular, and also the word future coming out quite strongly, really highlighting, I think, the importance of collaboration in the future of cash programming as we go forward. So with that, I will close. Thank you to everyone who joined today for the first day of the webinar week. We hope it's been interesting so far. And we look forward to you joining us tomorrow and on all of the other days as well. So yeah, with that, I will say goodbye, good evening, or indeed good morning, depending on where you are in the world. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.